Daniel here with Bullseye Leak Detection, coming to you today to talk about irrigation systems. Springtime's coming in, and this is the time when we turn on our irrigation systems. What I'm going to go over today is how to turn on and off irrigation system, how irrigation control valves work, and how you can do some basic checks and maintenance on them, and how we can see if we have leaks on the irrigation system. All right, let's start off with our valves. These are ball valves. Sometimes they might be gate valves. But the valves turn the water on and off to the house and to the irrigation system. Typically, where your water comes into the house or goes out the back of the house, there will be a second valve feeding to the irrigation system. This home has an irrigation valve that feeds the entire system. So there's a pipe going from the front yard to the backyard feeding both banks of irrigation valves. By turning off the valve, I can turn off all of the irrigation system as needed. Next thing we want to look at is our irrigation control valves. They're pretty standard nowadays. There's a couple different parts to them. So first of all, there's a control solenoid that opens and closes the valve. This little handle right here will adjust the amount of flow. So if the handle's all the way down, it means that very little water goes through the valve. And if I open it up, it means a maximum amount of water can flow through the valve. The other part of the valve is the anti-siphon device. Some of these are serviceable and you can unthread them. And as you open it up, you can see there's some springs and parts in there, and that prevents the irrigation water from going back into the domestic water system. Next, to see if our irrigation valves are working, there's typically some sort of bleed or set screw in the back. Sometimes it's a lever, a lot of times it's this little knob, and we can turn that, and that's going to turn the irrigation system on. You can see the anti-siphon is working because it's preventing the water from coming back. If we're checking to see if our sprinkler valve is leaking by the valve and causing the water meter to run constantly or a high water bill, we can check the valve by opening the anti-siphon. It simply unscrews. We can look inside. And as you can see, if the water was running and bypassing, we would see water flowing like so. So I'm turning on the set valve to allow the water to flow, but if the valve was bad, it would be flowing continuously because the valve was bad, allowing the water to leak. And this is the same as if your toilet was running constantly. It's just constantly running around the clock and it's dumping the water into the yard slowly. And because it's going slowly, sometimes you don't see that water pooling or making a mess because it's just slowly coming out 24 hours a day. So for checking to see if our irrigation system is leaking, once we've checked to see if the valves, where the valves are and how they work, the best thing we can do is check the meter. And we're going to do that by flipping the lid and taking a look at the numbers. Okay, so if you can see here that we got the numbers are showing up on the screen. This is the flow rate on the water meter, and that tells us that there's water running on the property past the meter. Now what we're going to do is go turn off the irrigation valve and see if that goes to zero, and that'll indicate that we have a leak on the irrigation system. I'm turning off the irrigation valve, isolating the water from the meter and the house from the irrigation system, and we'll go back and check the valve. Okay, we're now checking the meter, and the meter is reading 0. So we know that that water that was showing up as usage was from the irrigation system, and we'll figure out what on the irrigation system is malfunctioning. All right, next I'm going to check my irrigation systems to see if anything is leaking above ground that's visible. So I'm looking for things that are dripping, weeping, or leaking above on the valve. So if areas are wet or dripping, those are areas of concern. So I want to make sure to have the set screws are tight and that the valves are in the correct position. Let's go check the backyard. All right, checking the rest of the irrigation system. We're going to check the valves once again to see if there's anything dripping. We can also open the anti-siphons again and take a look to see if any water's passing by. If you hear the sound of water flowing, we can see it's dry inside, so we know this valve is not leaking. Also, check to see if your hose bibs may be tied into your irrigation system. Sometimes your hose bibs and yard hose bibs especially will be on a separate system than the water to the house and may be leaking. So we have one hose bib here, and we have another one on the other side of the yard. We'll go check now. Okay, checking the other hose, we can see there's no drips or active leaks above ground here. Now we're going to go back to the last point, which is our controller. Now, most of the time when homeowners have irrigation controllers in the wintertime and they say that their irrigation system's off, they simply put the clock to off, to stop, or they kill the power to the timer. By turning the power off to the timer, it does not turn off the water to the irrigation system. It only stops the timer from activating the solenoids in the valves from running on their normal cycle. Okay, just want to recap here what we've gone over. So we've talked about how to turn the water on and off to the irrigation system to determine if the system's using water. We've gone over how an irrigation valve works and how we can check that valve to see if it's bypassing, and if it's on the low pressure side going to your sprinklers or drip system, or if it's on the high pressure side going from your valve to your sprinkler control valve on the high pressure side. Typically, if your leak is on the high pressure side, it's going to be a much more dramatic leak, a higher water bill, higher usage, and may require leak detection to locate. On the low pressure side, we recommend you first use your landscaper or check for irrigation problems by running the system and looking for where water might be surfacing first before going through the process of capping off a low pressure system to make it testable for doing leak detection. And this is how we test our irrigation system in spring.